Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video from Gone Legends. In today's video, we'll be highlighting American celebrities who passed away today, and in recent days, along with other notable individuals from around the world. Before we proceed, we kindly ask for your support. If you find these tributes meaningful, please take a moment to like this video. It truly means a lot to us. Thank you for being here. And now, let's begin. 1.
Robert Reed Carradine. Robert Reed Carradine passed away on February 23, 2026, at the age of 71. The cause of death was confirmed as suicide following a long and private battle with bipolar disorder. Born on March 24, 1954, in Los Angeles, California, United States, Carradine was part of the legendary Carradine acting family. As the son of John Carradine and brother to David and Keith Carradine, he grew up surrounded by Hollywood's creative energy. Yet Robert built his own identity through sincerity and depth rather than relying solely on his family name. He rose to prominence in the 1970s and became a cultural icon in 1984 with his role as Louis Skolnick in Revenge of the Nerds. The character became a symbol of intelligence and individuality for audiences worldwide. Later, he gained renewed popularity portraying Sam Maguire in Disney's Lizzie McGuire, introducing him to a younger generation. Despite professional success, he quietly struggled with mental health challenges for years. His passing sparked conversations about mental health awareness in the entertainment industry. Carradine's legacy lives on through decades of film and television that continue to resonate with fans.
2.
Charles S. Dean Sr. Charles S. Dean Sr. passed away on February 23, 2026, at the age of 89 from natural causes. Born in 1937 in the United States, he devoted much of his life to public service and civic leadership. Growing up during a transformative period in American history, Dean developed a strong belief in community responsibility and ethical governance. Over the years, he held various leadership roles focused on infrastructure development, education policy, and local government reform. Known for his collaborative leadership style, he prioritized listening to citizens and fostering unity across political lines. He mentored younger officials and advocated for transparency in public service. While he may not have been a nationally recognized figure, his impact at the community level was significant and lasting. His passing was felt deeply by those who worked alongside him and benefited from his dedication. Charles S. Dean Sr.'s legacy remains visible in the policies he helped shape and in the spirit of service he inspired in future leaders.
3.
Birgitta Anderson. Birgitta Anderson passed away on February 22, 2026, at the age of 92 due to natural causes. Born on April 20, 1933, in Mariestad, Sweden, she became one of the most beloved figures in Swedish entertainment. Anderson's career spanned more than 6 decades, during which she worked in theater, film, and television. She became widely known for her comedic brilliance and expressive performances that captured the hearts of Swedish audiences. From stage productions to classic television roles, she helped shape modern Swedish cultural identity. Her warmth, humor, and charisma made her a household name across generations. Beyond comedy, she brought emotional depth to her roles, earning widespread respect among colleagues and critics. When news of her passing broke, tributes poured in from across Sweden, honoring her contributions to national arts and culture. Birgitta Anderson remains remembered as a cornerstone of Scandinavian entertainment whose influence continues through archived performances and enduring public affection.
4.
Lucy Four. Lucy Four passed away on February 22, 2026, at the age of 23, following a sudden medical emergency. Born in 2002 in the United States, he emerged as a young American rapper representing the digital era underground music scene. Lucy Four gained recognition through online platforms where his emotionally raw lyrics and experimental production style resonated strongly with younger audiences. His music often explored themes of identity, mental struggle, ambition, and isolation, topics that connected deeply with his generation. Despite his young age, He built a growing fan base that admired his honesty and originality. His unexpected death shocked supporters who saw him as an emerging voice in modern rap culture. Though his career was brief, his impact within the underground scene was meaningful. Lucy Fours's music continues to circulate online, preserving the voice of a young artist whose life ended far too soon.
5.
Ali Tutal. Ali Tutal passed away on February 22, 2026, at the age of 75 after suffering a fatal brain hemorrhage. Born on June 17, 1950, in Diyarbakir, Turkey, he became a respected actor in Turkish cinema and television. Tutal began his acting journey in the 1970s and gradually built a strong reputation for portraying intense and emotionally layered characters. Over his long career, he appeared in more than 50 films and television series, contributing significantly to Turkey's film industry. Known for his authenticity and disciplined approach, he brought realism and cultural depth to every performance. His work often reflected social themes relevant to Turkish society. Colleagues admired his professionalism, and audiences appreciated his strong screen presence. His sudden passing left a noticeable void in Turkish entertainment. Ali Tutal's legacy continues through the many productions that preserve his powerful performances.
6.
Raymond Bouchard. Raymond Bouchard passed away on February 21, 2026, at the age of 80 due to age-related health complications. Born in 1945 in Quebec, Canada, he became a highly respected figure in French-Canadian cinema and television. Bouchard built a distinguished career portraying complex characters that reflected Quebec's evolving social and political identity. During the 1980s and 1990s, he gained critical acclaim for his work in major film and television productions. His commanding presence and emotional nuance earned him awards and recognition throughout Canada. Beyond accolades, he was admired for his dedication to authentic storytelling. He played a key role in elevating Quebec cinema to broader audiences. His passing marked a significant loss for Canada's artistic community. Raymond Bouchard's legacy endures in the films and television dramas that continue to showcase his remarkable talent.
7.
Willie Colon. Willie Colon passed away on February 21, 2026, at the age of 75 due to complications related to long-term health issues. Born on April 28, 1950, in the Bronx, New York, United States, Colon became one of the most influential pioneers of salsa music. Growing up in a Puerto Rican household in New York City, he was surrounded by rhythm from childhood. By his teenage years, he had mastered the trombone and quickly emerged as a bold new force in Latin music. In the late 1960s and 1970s, his collaboration with legendary singer Hector Lavoe reshaped salsa forever. Their albums became cultural landmarks, blending Afro-Caribbean roots with the gritty energy of urban America. Beyond performing, Colon was an innovative producer who helped shape the sound of an entire generation. His music carried social commentary, cultural pride, and raw emotion. Over decades, he remained a powerful voice in Latin culture, influencing artists worldwide. His passing was mourned deeply across the global Latin community. Willie Colon's legacy continues through timeless recordings that still ignite dance floors and celebrate heritage.
8.
Miroslav Krachik passed away on February 21, 2026, at the age of 79 after battling a prolonged illness. Born in 1947 in Poland, he became a respected journalist and public intellectual during crucial decades of political transformation in his country. Growing up in post-war Poland, Krachik developed a passion for truth and thoughtful analysis. He pursued journalism with determination, eventually earning recognition for his balanced reporting and insightful commentary. Through newspaper columns, essays, and television appearances, he addressed democracy, social reform, and national identity. During periods of uncertainty, readers turned to him for clarity and perspective. He was known for his integrity and measured tone, even when covering controversial issues. His work helped shape public discourse during times of change. Colleagues admired his dedication to ethical journalism. His death marked the loss of a guiding voice in Polish media. Miroslav Krawczyk's influence endures in the archives of his writings and in the standards of responsible journalism he championed.
9.
Ismail Kanater passed away on February 20, 2026, at the age of 81 due to age-related health complications. Born in 1945 in the Middle East, Kanater became known as a respected cultural advocate and community leader. Throughout his life, he dedicated himself to strengthening educational and artistic initiatives within his region. He believed deeply in preserving cultural heritage while empowering younger generations to pursue creative expression. Kanater worked closely with community organizations, supporting youth programs and public cultural events. His leadership was marked by humility and steady commitment rather than public recognition. Though he was not internationally famous, his influence within his community was profound. He mentored aspiring artists, encouraged civic participation, and promoted dialogue during times of social change. Those who knew him described him as principled, patient, and compassionate. His passing left a meaningful void among colleagues and community members. Ismail Kanater's legacy lives on in the institutions he supported and in the generations he helped guide toward opportunity and cultural pride.
10.
John Joseph Nicholson was born on April 22, 1937, in Neptune City, New Jersey, United States, into circumstances clouded by secrecy. The truth of his birth was concealed from him in a decision that seemed protective at the time but would later echo through his identity like a quiet earthquake. His biological mother, June Nicholson, was only a teenager when she gave birth to him. In 1937 America, an unmarried pregnant girl faced social ruin, judgment, and lasting stigma. So the family constructed a story. Jack would grow up believing that his grandmother, Ethel Mae Nicholson, was his mother, and that his actual mother was merely his older sister. The identity of his biological father was uncertain, a shadow without a face. For 37 years, he lived inside that narrative, never suspecting that the foundation beneath him was built on carefully maintained silence. The revelation came in 1974, not through a heartfelt family confession, not through a quiet conversation at a kitchen table, but through investigative journalism. A Time magazine reporter researching Nicholson's life uncovered public records that did not align with the official family version. Phone calls were made. Documents were reviewed. Questions surfaced. And suddenly, the truth emerged with irreversible force. By the time Jack learned that June was his mother and Ethel was his grandmother, both women had already passed away. There would be no confrontation, no emotional reckoning face-to-face, no chance to ask why the truth had been hidden. Imagine discovering that your identity, your childhood memories, your understanding of who you are, had been altered without your consent. Imagine realizing that the people who raised you carried a secret so profound that it redefined your entire origin story. Nicholson later claimed he took the news philosophically, that it did not shatter him. But identity does not fracture loudly. It shifts quietly, beneath the surface, influencing behavior in ways even the person affected may not fully recognize. That early emotional dislocation may help explain the restless energy in his performances, the unpredictable spark behind his eyes, the sense that beneath every smile there was something untamed. But long before the awards and acclaim, Nicholson faced another painful reality: obscurity. When he moved to Los Angeles as a teenager, Hollywood was a distant dream, shimmering beyond studio gates. He worked in the animation department at MGM, answering phones and running errands, observing actors who seemed larger than life. Yet no one saw that same inevitability in him. He did not possess the conventional leading man appearance that studios preferred. His features were sharp, his smile mischievous rather than romantic, his presence slightly dangerous. He began acting in low-budget films during the late 1950s and early 1960s, many of them produced by Roger Corman. These were modest productions, often dismissed as exploitation cinema. The pay was limited. The recognition was minimal. There were moments when Nicholson questioned whether acting was sustainable at all. He turned to screenwriting for survival. co-writing films such as The Trip in 1967, unsure if his path would ever stabilize. The years of near success can be more psychologically draining than outright failure. He was talented, yet not fully embraced, visible, yet not fully recognized, visible, yet not fully recognized. That state of limbo can wear on the spirit. Nicholson's personal life during these early years reflected a similar unpredictability. Relationships formed intensely and ended abruptly. He resisted marriage, later admitting that he feared confinement and the possibility of failing someone he loved. Commitment, to him, felt like a structure that could collapse. Perhaps the instability of his own beginnings influenced that fear. As his career slowly gained traction in the late 1960s, particularly after his breakthrough role in Easy Rider in 1969, fame did not bring peace. Instead, it magnified everything. His sudden rise transformed him into a symbol of counterculture rebellion. But with that elevation came scrutiny and expectation. The industry that once overlooked him now demanded consistency at the highest level. In the 1970s, Nicholson immersed himself in roles that explored rebellion, alienation, and psychological tension. Five Easy Pieces in 1970 presented him as a man disconnected from his privileged roots, wandering without anchor. Chinatown in 1974 immersed him in corruption and moral ambiguity. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975 required him to inhabit defiance against institutional authority, earning him his first Academy Award for Best Actor. These performances were powerful because they felt lived in. He did not simply act instability, he understood it, yet with such intensity comes cost. Actors who repeatedly explore psychological extremes must compartmentalize or risk internal exhaustion. That cost became particularly evident during the filming of The Shining in 1980. Director Stanley Kubrick demanded relentless repetition, sometimes requiring dozens upon dozens of takes for a single scene. Nicholson had to sustain escalating madness under controlled conditions for months. Emotional volatility, over and over again until performance and reality blur at the edges. The audience would later see an iconic portrayal of descent into insanity. They would not see the toll of maintaining that descent repeatedly under intense directorial pressure. As decades passed, Nicholson's public image evolved into that of a Hollywood titan, yet aging introduced quieter battles. By the late 2000s, whispers circulated about memory decline. Memorizing scripts became more challenging. The sharp delivery that once defined him required greater effort. For an actor whose presence was rooted in dialogue and timing, the possibility of cognitive slowing was not merely inconvenient. It threatened identity itself. He did not announce retirement. He simply stepped away after his final film role in 2010's How Do You Know? The withdrawal was subtle but unmistakable. Public appearances grew rare. The once constant figure courtside at Los Angeles Lakers games appeared less frequently. Photographs captured him older, more private, occasionally alone on balconies overlooking the city that once revolved around him. Jack Nicholson is still alive today, residing in the United States. There's been no confirmed life-threatening illness publicly announced, no official cause of death to report because his story has not yet ended. Yet perhaps one of the most profound chapters of his life is this quiet phase, where a man who once commanded the screen now lives beyond it. The silence after decades of noise can be its own emotional terrain. From the hidden truth of his birth, to years of professional uncertainty, to psychological immersion in volatile characters, to the quiet retreat of aging, Nicholson's life has never been a simple arc of success. It has been a layered narrative of resilience, secrecy, rebellion, brilliance, and inevitable human vulnerability. And this is only the beginning of the legend. Long before the Academy Awards, before the iconic lines that would echo through generations, before the world would come to know the unmistakable arch of his eyebrow and the dangerous curve of his smile, Jack Nicholson was simply another young man drifting through Los Angeles with ambition in his pocket and uncertainty in his chest. The city shimmered with possibility, but it was also merciless. Hollywood in the late 1950s was still ruled by polished leading men and carefully manufactured stars. Jack did not resemble the Golden Boys on studio posters. He carried something sharper, something less predictable. His presence felt untamed, and for years the industry did not know how to shape that energy into something marketable. After graduating from high school in New Jersey, Nicholson moved west to California, drawn by opportunity and perhaps by an instinct that his future existed beyond the small-town rhythms of his upbringing. He initially worked in the animation department at MGM Studios, running errands and answering phones. There was a quiet irony in those early days. He was inside the machinery of Hollywood, yet far from its spotlight. He watched actors arrive in press suits, watched directors stride across sound stages with authority, watched fame move like currency. It was close enough to feel, yet distant enough to remain unattainable. His early acting career unfolded in low-budget films, many produced by Roger Corman. Titles like The Crybaby Killer in 1958 and The Little Shop of Horrors in 1960 did not elevate him to stardom, but they gave him something far more important: experience. These productions were fast, chaotic, and often underfunded. Actors had little time to rehearse. Scenes were shot quickly. Mistakes were not luxuries anyone could afford. In that environment, Nicholson developed a survival instinct. He learned to make bold choices. He learned to command attention even when the script did not fully support him. He learned that subtlety could coexist with unpredictability. Yet the struggle persisted. Throughout the early 1960s, he hovered at the edge of recognition without crossing into it. The financial instability weighed on him. He considered focusing entirely on screenwriting, a craft he genuinely respected. He co-wrote The Trip in 1967, a psychedelic exploration reflective of the era's shifting consciousness. The counterculture movement was beginning to reshape America, and Nicholson's unconventional energy suddenly felt less like a liability and more like an asset. The culture was changing. Audiences were changing. The polished heroes of yesterday felt disconnected from the turbulence of the times. And then, almost unexpectedly, came the role that altered everything. In 1969, Easy Rider exploded onto screens, directed by Dennis Hopper and starring Peter Fonda. The film captured the restless spirit of a generation disillusioned by authority and hungry for authenticity. Nicholson's role as George Hanson, a Southern lawyer who joins two bikers on a cross-country journey, was not initially intended to be the centerpiece. But something happened when he appeared on screen. His performance was alive with humor, vulnerability, and tragic inevitability. He delivered lines with a casual brilliance that felt effortless yet deeply layered. Audiences were captivated. Critics took notice. He received his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. It was as though the industry had finally caught up to him. The outsider was no longer waiting to be invited in. He had kicked the door open. The 1970s would become Nicholson's defining decade, a period in which he did not merely act in films but embodied the evolving psyche of America itself. In 5 Easy Pieces in 1970, he portrayed Bobby DuPay, a man estranged from his privileged upbringing, drifting through blue-collar labor while fleeing emotional responsibility. The famous diner scene, in which he argues about a simple chicken salad sandwich, was not just about food, it was about frustration, about the inability to conform, about rebellion expressed through mundane circumstances. Nicholson infused the character with a complexity that felt startlingly real. He was neither hero nor villain. He was human. Then came A Town in 1974, a film steeped in corruption and moral ambiguity. As private investigator Jake Gittes, Nicholson navigated a labyrinth of deceit set against the backdrop of 1930s Los Angeles. His performance was restrained yet powerful, capturing a man who believed he understood the system only to discover its deeper rot. The closing line, "Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown," became more than dialogue. It became cultural shorthand for the inevitability of corruption. Nicholson's portrayal earned him another Academy Award nomination, further cementing his status as a leading force in American cinema. In 1975, he took on the role of Randall P. McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a performance that would define his legacy. McMurphy was a criminal who feigned insanity to escape prison labor, only to find himself battling the oppressive authority of Nurse Ratched within a psychiatric institution. Nicholson brought ferocity, humor, tenderness, and tragic depth to the role. He made McMurphy a symbol of resistance against dehumanizing systems. When he won the Academy Award for Best Actor, it was not simply recognition of a performance. It was acknowledgement that a new kind of leading man had fully arrived. But fame is rarely gentle. With each success came greater scrutiny. Nicholson's off-screen life became the subject of fascination. His relationships, his parties, his appetite for risk were magnified by the press. He became synonymous with excess, with late-night gatherings in Los Angeles mansions where artists, musicians, and actors mingled until sunrise. Yet beneath the spectacle, he remained fiercely intelligent and deliberate about his career choices. He selected roles that challenged him, characters that required psychological excavation rather than surface charm. His ability to oscillate between menace and magnetism reached new heights in 1980 with The Shining. As Jack Torrance, a writer descending into madness within the isolated Overlook Hotel, Nicholson delivered a performance that was both theatrical and terrifying. The infamous scene in which he breaks through a bathroom door and exclaims, "Here's Johnny," became one of the most recognizable moments in film history. But behind that cinematic triumph lay months of exhaustive repetition under Stanley Kubrick's demanding direction. The psychological intensity of sustaining such rage repeatedly left an imprint. Art had once again required sacrifice. As the 1980s progressed, Nicholson demonstrated versatility that defied typecasting. In terms of endearment, in 1983, he portrayed retired astronaut Garrett Breedlove, earning his second Academy Award, this time for Best Supporting Actor. The role revealed tenderness beneath bravado, proving he could evoke warmth as convincingly as menace. In 1989, he embraced flamboyant villaining as the Joker in Tim Burton's Batman. His portrayal was theatrical, chaotic, and unforgettable. The film became a global phenomenon, and Nicholson negotiated a profit-sharing deal that made him one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood history. The outsider who once struggled to pay bills had become a titan commanding both artistic respect and financial power. Yet even as success accumulated, the undercurrent of unpredictability never vanished. Nicholson thrived in complexity. He gravitated toward characters who were flawed, conflicted, sometimes morally ambiguous. Perhaps because he understood that human beings are rarely simple. By the end of the decade, Jack Nicholson was no longer merely an actor. He was an institution, a presence, a force whose very involvement in a project elevated its significance. But beneath the accolades and applause, the journey had been anything but smooth. It had been carved through persistence, shaped by rejection, strengthened by risk. The outsider had not only survived Hollywood, he had redefined it. And still, the story was far from over. By the time the 1990s arrived, Jack Nicholson was no longer climbing toward greatness. He was standing at its summit. The rebellious outsider who once struggled for recognition had transformed into a cinematic monarch whose presence alone could define a film's gravity. Yet greatness carries its own burden. Expectations grow heavier. Audiences anticipate brilliance. Directors demand transcendence. And Nicholson, never one to retreat from pressure, leaned into it with calculated intensity. In 1992, he delivered one of the most explosive performances of his career in A Few Good Men. As Colonel Nathan R. Jessup, a hardened Marine officer defending the logic of military discipline, Nicholson stepped into the courtroom scene that would etch itself permanently into film history when he declared, "You can't handle the truth." It was not simply a line of dialogue. It was a thunderclap. His voice did not rise in desperation. It rose in conviction. The character believed in his own righteousness so completely that moral boundaries dissolved. That performance earned Nicholson another Academy Award nomination and reinforced what audiences already knew: when he spoke, the room listened. But behind the commanding authority he projected on screen, time was moving forward. Nicholson was aging in an industry that often discards actors once their youth fades. Yet he possessed something that transcended youth. His power was intellectual, psychological. His characters did not rely on physicality alone. They relied on presence. And presence does not diminish easily. In 1997, he would prove once more that reinvention was one of his greatest strengths. In As Good as It Gets, Nicholson portrayed Melvin Udall, a successful novelist burdened by obsessive-compulsive disorder, social cruelty, and profound loneliness. It was a role that required surgical precision. Melvin was abrasive, politically incorrect, emotionally distant, and yet painfully vulnerable beneath the surface. Nicholson navigated that delicate balance without sentimentality. He allowed the character's flaws to remain visible, while gradually revealing his humanity. The performance earned him his third Academy Award, this time again for Best Actor, placing him among a rare circle of performers whose excellence spanned decades. 3 Oscars. 12 nominations. Decades of cultural impact. By any measure, Nicholson had secured his place in cinematic immortality. Yet success does not silence personal complexity. Throughout these years, his private life remained as layered as his performances. He fathered 5 children with different women but never married. He once admitted that marriage frightened him, that the permanence of it felt incompatible with his nature. He valued freedom intensely, perhaps because so much of his early identity had been shaped without his knowledge. Commitment, for Nicholson, may have felt like surrendering control in a world where control had once been an illusion. His relationships were passionate but often short-lived. Actresses, models, artists. His romantic history read like a chronicle of Hollywood glamour, yet none resulted in lifelong partnership. There was something solitary at his core. Even in crowded rooms, even at star-studded gatherings, he seemed slightly apart, observing rather than fully immersing. That detachment, subtle but present, gave his on-screen characters an edge that felt authentic. The late 1990s and early 2000s marked another evolution. Nicholson embraced roles that reflected maturity rather than rebellion. In About Schmidt in 2002, he portrayed a recently retired insurance executive confronting the emptiness of routine existence. The film was quiet, introspective, almost painfully honest. Nicholson's performance revealed a man grappling with regret and insignificance. There were no grand speeches, no explosive confrontations. Instead, there were small moments, glances, pauses, letters written in solitude that spoke volumes about aging and self-reflection. Critics praised the depth of restraint he demonstrated. He no longer needed to dominate every frame. He understood the power of silence. In 2003's Something's Gotta Give, he shared the screen with Diane Keaton, portraying a wealthy bachelor forced to confront vulnerability and love. The film allowed audiences to see Nicholson in a softer light, aging but charismatic, confident yet capable of emotional growth. It resonated with viewers who had aged alongside him, who saw in his character a reflection of their own fears about time and intimacy. Then, in 2006, came The Departed, directed by Martin Scorsese. Nicholson portrayed crime boss Frank Costello, a volatile, theatrical, and deeply dangerous figure. It was a reminder that even in his late 60s, he could command menace with effortless authority. He did not merely act unpredictability. He embodied it. The performance was layered with humor and threat, a dance between charm and chaos. Younger actors on set reportedly watched him with a mixture of admiration and awe. He was no longer simply a co-star. He was a living legend. Yet as the applause continued, subtle shifts were occurring behind the scenes. Memorization of scripts required greater concentration. The physical demands of production felt heavier. The industry that once chased him now offered roles less frequently, not because his talent had diminished, but because Hollywood relentlessly pursues youth. Nicholson remained selective, unwilling to dilute his legacy with projects that did not challenge him. His final film appearance came in 2010 with How Do You Know? It was not a dramatic farewell. There was no announcement declaring retirement. Instead, there was quiet withdrawal. He stepped away without ceremony, as if the performance had simply reached its natural conclusion. Rumors circulated about memory issues, about the difficulty of learning lines. None were officially confirmed, but his absence became unmistakable. Public sightings grew rare. The man who had once defined red carpets began living largely out of view. Occasionally, photographs emerged of him seated courtside at Los Angeles Lakers games, sunglasses still shielding his eyes, observing the action with familiar intensity. He had been a devoted Lakers fan for decades, his presence almost as iconic as the team itself, but even those appearances became less frequent. Aging for someone who once radiated dominance can feel like surrendering territory. The body slows. The mind demands rest. The spotlight, once intoxicating, becomes exhausting. For Nicholson, the retreat seemed intentional. He had given the world everything it demanded: brilliance, unpredictability, vulnerability, menace. Perhaps the quiet was earned. Today, Jack Nicholson remains alive, residing in the United States, largely removed from public life. There has been no confirmed fatal illness, no tragic headline marking an end. Instead, there is a living legend existing beyond the glare that once defined him. The absence itself has become part of his mystique. Audiences wonder if he will ever return, if one final performance remains hidden in the wings. But even if he never steps onto a set again, the legacy is unshakable. From obscurity to dominance, from rebellion to mastery, Nicholson's journey has been defined not by ease, but by transformation. He has embodied madness and tenderness, arrogance and fragility, chaos and control. He has navigated fame without surrendering individuality. And as the years progress, his story becomes not merely one of cinematic achievement, but of human endurance. The navigation of identity, ambition, love, excess, and aging under the relentless gaze of the world. The crown of fire he once wore still glows, even in silence. Fame can build a legend, but it can also construct a mask. Behind the celebrated performances, behind the sharp suits and ever-present sunglasses, there was a man navigating relationships, fatherhood, indulgence, and the delicate balance between freedom and responsibility. Jack Nicholson's public image often revolved around charisma and excess, but the emotional landscape beneath that surface was far more intricate than the headlines suggested. As his star power intensified throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Nicholson became synonymous with Hollywood nightlife. Parties at his Mulholland Drive home were the stuff of industry folklore. Musicians, actors, writers, and directors gathered in rooms thick with conversation and cigarette smoke, where laughter carried into the early hours of morning. It was a time when Hollywood felt electric, rebellious, and untamed. Nicholson thrived in that atmosphere. He possessed the rare ability to command attention without appearing to demand it. His voice carried authority, yet his humor disarmed. People gravitated toward him not only because of his fame, but because of the unpredictable energy he brought into every space. But excess carries consequences. Heavy drinking became part of his persona. Long nights blurred into early mornings. The pace of that lifestyle, though exhilarating, can erode the spirit over time. Friends and colleagues occasionally voiced concern about the intensity with which he embraced indulgence. Yet Nicholson rarely allowed public criticism to shape his choices. He valued autonomy fiercely. If he was to rise or fall, it would be on his own terms. His romantic life unfolded with similar intensity. Nicholson shared relationships with several high-profile women, including actress Angelica Houston, with whom he had a long and complex partnership spanning nearly 2 decades. Their connection was passionate, creative, and at times volatile. Houston once described their relationship as a blend of deep affection and painful honesty. Nicholson's reluctance to marry did not stem from a lack of love. It stemmed from a fear of permanence. He once admitted that he did not trust himself to uphold the vows of marriage, that he feared the potential failure more than he desired the security. Fatherhood added another layer of complexity. Nicholson has 5 children, each from different relationships. Though his lifestyle often kept him in the public eye, those close to him have spoken of his affection for his children and his desire to remain present in their lives. Balancing global fame with private responsibility is never simple. For Nicholson, it required compartmentalization. The world saw the icon. His children saw the man. In 1989, during the height of his fame, Nicholson faced one of the more controversial moments of his life. An incident occurred involving an altercation with another driver on a Los Angeles freeway. In a moment of anger, Nicholson reportedly used a golf club to strike the other man's car windshield. The incident made headlines, portraying him as volatile and impulsive. He later settled the matter legally, but the episode reinforced the perception that his temper, much like some of his characters, could flare unexpectedly. It was a reminder that the line between persona and personality can blur under pressure. Nicholson's intensity on screen was celebrated. Off-screen, it occasionally complicated his narrative. Yet even during controversy, he retained public fascination. The audience did not turn away. Instead, the myth deepened. He was not polished. He was not sanitized. He was human, flawed, and unapologetically so. As the 1990s progressed and into the early 2000s, something subtle began to shift. The parties became less frequent. The circle tightened. Age brings reflection, and reflection often softens the appetite for chaos. Nicholson remained sharp, witty, and engaged, but the hunger for constant spectacle seemed to fade. His home in the Hollywood Hills became more sanctuary than stage. He invested in art, collecting works that reflected his appreciation for creativity beyond film, painting, sculpture, architecture. These became quieter passions that did not require applause. His devotion to the Los Angeles Lakers remained constant. For decades, he was a courtside fixture at games, his presence almost ceremonial. Broadcasters would cut to him during crucial moments, as if his reaction carried narrative weight equal to the players on the court. Basketball offered him something different from cinema. It was unpredictable in a way that did not require his performance. He could observe rather than embody, yet beneath the comfort of routine, the inevitability of aging lingered. The body, once tireless, began to signal limits. The mind, once razor-sharp in memorizing complex scripts, required more patience. Friends occasionally described him as increasingly private, not withdrawn entirely but selective. The industry he once dominated continued to evolve, embracing digital technology, new storytelling forms, younger faces. Nicholson, rather than chase relevance, seemed to accept that his era had been defined. There is a quiet dignity in stepping back voluntarily. Many actors cling to the spotlight long after its warmth begins to fade. Nicholson did not. His final performance in 2010 did not arrive with fanfare. It simply existed as a natural endpoint. He did not announce retirement. He allowed absence to speak. That silence, for someone who once filled theaters with his voice, carried its own poetry. Today, Jack Nicholson remains alive in the United States, largely removed from the rhythms of public life. Reports occasionally surface describing him spending time with family, watching games, or enjoying the California sun from the privacy of his home. There's been speculation about memory challenges associated with age, but no confirmed details have been publicly declared. What is clear is that the man who once commanded cinematic landscapes now chooses stillness. The myth of Jack Nicholson was built on intensity, on characters who roared, rebelled, and refused to conform. But the man behind that myth has navigated love, fatherhood, controversy, indulgence, and solitude with a complexity that defies simplification. He has known the thrill of adoration and the sting of scrutiny. He has tasted excess and embraced quiet. Freedom has always been central to his identity. Freedom to choose roles. Freedom to reject convention. Freedom to live without apology. That freedom, however, comes at a price. It can create distance. It can complicate permanence. It can magnify isolation as years pass. Yet Nicholson appears to have accepted that trade-off. The legend is not merely the sum of awards or iconic lines. It is the totality of a man who lived intensely, who refused to be reshaped by expectation, and who understood that brilliance often walks alongside imperfection. The story continues, deeper still. There is a moment in every legend's life when the noise begins to quiet, not abruptly, not with a dramatic collapse, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, like the dimming of theater lights after the final curtain call. For Jack Nicholson, that moment did not arrive in scandal or tragedy. It arrived in silence. After decades of dominance, after redefining what it meant to be a leading man, after delivering performances that reshaped American cinema, Nicholson stepped back. His final screen appearance came in 2010 with the romantic comedy How Do You Know? The film itself did not carry the weight of his earlier masterpieces, and perhaps that is part of the poetry. There was no grand farewell performance, no self-conscious swan song designed to summarize a career. Instead, there was simply a closing note, subtle, unannounced, final in ways that only became clear with time. Hollywood, a city that rarely slows down, continued moving forward. New stars rose. New franchises dominated box offices. Streaming platforms redefined distribution. The industry that Nicholson had once helped revolutionize transformed into something faster, louder, more digital. And he did not chase it. Rumors began circulating in the years that followed. Whispers about memory challenges. Speculation that he found it increasingly difficult to memorize scripts. For an actor whose strength lay in razor-sharp timing and verbal precision, such difficulties would have been deeply personal. No official medical condition has been publicly confirmed. There has been no announcement of a specific illness. But absence speaks. When a man who once thrived under studio lights retreats fully from them, there is always a reason, even if that reason remains private. Friends occasionally described him as content in retirement. He spent time at his longtime home in the Hollywood Hills, a house that had witnessed decades of laughter, music, and creative conversation. The parties that once defined its atmosphere faded into memory. The rooms grew quieter. The walls, perhaps, held echoes of conversations with directors, actors, and lovers who once filled them with energy. Time transforms even the most vibrant spaces into places of reflection. Nicholson's appearances became rare but meaningful. For years, he had been a permanent figure courtside at Los Angeles Lakers games. Broadcasters would cut to him during pivotal plays, as if his reaction carried narrative weight. The sunglasses remained, shielding his gaze, preserving the mystique, but even those appearances became less frequent in the late 2010s. When he did attend, fans responded not just with admiration, but with a kind of collective nostalgia. It was as though they were glimpsing a piece of cinematic history seated quietly among them. Aging for a legend is complex. The world remembers you at your peak. It remembers the intensity of The Shining, the defiance of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the commanding authority of a few good men. It remembers the grin, the fire, the unpredictability, but the human being beneath that memory must navigate slower mornings, heavier steps, quieter days. There is vulnerability in that transition, especially when the world once saw you as invincible. Nicholson has 5 children, and as he stepped away from public life, family reportedly became central. Grandchildren entered the picture. The man who once defined rebellion became a patriarchal presence, observing rather than performing. There is something profoundly human about that shift. The actor who once embodied chaos and defiance now occupies a role defined by continuity and legacy. He has never formally declared retirement. There has been no press conference, no emotional statement about closing a chapter. Perhaps that is intentional. Perhaps he understands that legends do not require announcements. They simply leave the stage when they choose, and when they do, their absence becomes part of their narrative. As of today, Jack Nicholson is alive, residing in the United States. There is no cause of death to recount, no tragic date to memorialize. his story remains open-ended. That fact alone adds a layer of poignancy. We are witnessing not a concluded biography, but a living epilogue. The most dramatic dangers of his life were not fatal illnesses or public collapses. They were quieter and more internal. The identity shock at 37 that revealed his entire childhood had been built on secrecy, the psychological toll of inhabiting madness repeatedly on screen, the temptations of excess that accompany fame, the emotional complexity of resisting permanence in love, the slow realization that memory and time cannot be negotiated like film contracts. Yet through all of it, he endured. He endured the uncertainty of early rejection. He endured the scrutiny of stardom. He endured the temptations that destroy many careers. He endured the slow fading of physical and cognitive ease. There is dignity in survival. There is power in knowing when to step back. Many performers cling desperately to relevance, chasing youth through cosmetic reinvention or desperate roles. Nicholson did not. He seemed to understand that legacy is not maintained through volume, but through impact. And his impact had already reshaped cinema permanently. When audiences revisit his films today, they do not see nostalgia alone. They see immediacy. His performances do not feel dated. They feel alive. The rage in The Shining still unsettles. The vulnerability in As Good as It Gets still resonates. The defiance in Cuckoo's Nest still inspires. That timelessness is rare. It cannot be manufactured. In recent years, photographs occasionally surface showing him older, hair thinned, posture softened. Some viewers react with shock, struggling to reconcile the image of the aging man with the explosive force they remember. But aging is not a contradiction of greatness. It is proof of it. To grow old after decades at the center of cultural conversation is itself an achievement. The stage may be quiet now. The scripts may remain unread. The camera may no longer roll, but the legend persists, not because he demands attention, but because his work refuses to fade. Jack Nicholson's story is not defined by a tragic ending. It is defined by an extraordinary journey still unfolding in private. The most powerful thing about his final chapter is that it belongs to him alone, unperformed, unbroadcast, untouched by box office numbers or critical reviews. The world waits, not for his return, but with gratitude for what he has already given. And still, there is more to reflect upon. When we look at Jack Nicholson's career from a distance, we see awards, box office triumphs, and cultural milestones. But when we look closer, when we truly study the characters he chose, we begin to see something deeper. His roles were not random. They were not safe. They were not designed to preserve image. They were reflections of tension, instability, defiance, vulnerability, and the fragile architecture of the human mind. In many ways, Nicholson did not just act in films. He held up a mirror to society, and sometimes that mirror was cracked. Take Randall P. McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Released in 1975 during a time when trust in institutions was crumbling in America, the character became more than a rebellious inmate in the psychiatric hospital. McMurphy was freedom personified. Loud, inappropriate, disruptive, unpredictable, but alive. Nicholson infused him with humor and warmth, which made his ultimate fate devastating. The character's battle against Nurse Ratched was not simply personal. It symbolized the individual versus oppressive systems, and when McMurphy's spirit was finally broken, audiences did not just mourn a character. They mourned the cost of nonconformity. Nicholson understood that pain. He did not portray rebellion as glamorous. He portrayed it as necessary and often tragic. Then there was Jack Torrance in The Shining. The name alone feels like an eerie echo of the actor himself. Torrance was a writer unraveling in isolation, a man whose ambition curdled into paranoia and violence. Nicholson did not rush the descent into madness. He allowed it to simmer. His facial expressions shifted subtly at first, a tightening of the jaw, a flicker in the eyes. By the time he declared, "Here's Johnny," the transformation was complete. The horror did not come from supernatural forces alone. It came from watching a man lose control of himself. That performance remains one of the most studied portrayals of psychological breakdown in cinematic history. In Chinatown, he presented a different shade of complexity. As Jake Gittes, he was cynical yet idealistic, confident yet blindsided. The film's ending bleak, unresolved haunting left audiences unsettled. Nicholson's performance captured the helplessness of confronting corruption too vast to defeat. There was no heroic triumph. There was only acceptance of an ugly truth. That moral ambiguity defined much of his career. He gravitated toward characters who were not easily categorized as good or evil. Melvin Udall in As Good as It Gets represented another evolution. Here was a man imprisoned not by institutions, but by his own compulsions. Obsessive-compulsive disorder dictated his routines, his social interactions, his isolation. Nicholson did not soften Melvin's cruelty for audience comfort. He allowed the character's sharpness to remain intact, gradually revealing the loneliness beneath it. The transformation was not miraculous. It was incremental, awkward, human. And in that humanity, Nicholson found depth that resonated with viewers who recognized their own imperfections. Even in Batman, as the Joker, he injected theatrical madness with layered intelligence. He was flamboyant, yes, but never cartoonish. There was calculation behind the chaos. Nicholson's Joker was not merely a villain. He was an anarchic force exposing hypocrisy. His laughter felt dangerous because it was rooted in awareness. He knew the system was corrupt, and he chose to burn it rather than reform it. Throughout his career, Nicholson consistently avoided simple heroes. He chose flawed men wrestling with ego, fear, authority, desire, perhaps because he understood that perfection is uninteresting. Conflict is where truth resides, and truth, in art, demands courage. His performances often carried a quiet vulnerability beneath bravado. Watch closely, and you'll see it. The pause before a retort. The hesitation before a confession. The glance that lingers just a fraction too long. These were not accidents. Nicholson mastered the art of layering emotion beneath dialogue. He allowed audiences to sense what characters refused to say. This emotional layering may trace back to his own hidden childhood truth. Growing up in a household built on secrecy could cultivate an instinct for subtext. When your earliest reality is constructed around omission, you learn to read between lines. Nicholson brought that instinct into his craft. He understood that what remains unsaid can be more powerful than what is spoken. Directors respected him not just for his charisma, but for his intelligence. He was deeply involved in shaping scenes, adjusting dialogue, refining motivation. He did not approach acting passively. He dissected characters, searching for their contradictions. Because contradiction is human. As the years progressed, younger actors cited him as influence. His ability to balance menace and humor became a blueprint for complex performance. The anti-hero archetype that dominates modern television and film owes much to Nicholson's groundwork. Before morally ambiguous protagonists were fashionable, he embodied them unapologetically, but there is an emotional cost to repeatedly exploring darkness. When an actor inhabits rage, madness, and moral conflict for decades, it requires resilience to separate performance from self. Nicholson appeared to manage that boundary. Yet the intensity of his roles often paralleled the intensity of his lifestyle. It is difficult to determine where art ended and life began. Perhaps that blur enhanced authenticity. What remains undeniable is that his body of work forms a psychological map of late 20th century America. From counterculture rebellion to institutional distrust, from romantic disillusionment to existential reflection, Nicholson's characters mirrored societal shifts. He was not merely acting within history, he was embodying its tensions. And now, in quiet retirement, those performances stand untouched. They do not require his continued presence to remain relevant. They breathe independently. Students study them. Critics analyze them. Audiences revisit them with fresh perspective. Jack Nicholson's genius was not volume. It was depth. It was the willingness to reveal ugliness without apology. It was the courage to portray vulnerability without sentimentality. It was the instinct to choose roles that challenged comfort. He once dominated the screen with fire. Today, the fire exists in memory and film reels, flickering whenever someone presses play. But the emotional journey of his life extends beyond the characters he portrayed. There is still more to uncover. There are actors who chase immortality, who hunger for statues and headlines, who measure their worth in applause. And then there are those who seem almost amused by the machinery of fame, who accept recognition without ever appearing dependent on it. Jack Nicholson belonged to the latter. He reached the summit of Hollywood, not by chasing acceptance, but by refusing to compromise who he was. And in doing so, he built a legacy that feels less like a career and more like a seismic shift in cinema itself. By the time he entered his 60s, Nicholson was no longer simply a performer. He was a reference point. Young actors were compared to him. Directors invoked his name when searching for intensity. Film critics dissected his performances as though they were literature. He had become a standard against which complexity was measured. Yet despite the reverence, he rarely indulged in self-mythologizing. He gave interviews that were sharp, witty, sometimes evasive. He understood the power of mystique. He understood the revealing too much can dilute presence. His Academy Award record speaks loudly. 12 nominations, 3 wins. Only a handful of performers in history share that level of recognition. But awards, while significant, are not what cement his legacy. What cemented it was transformation. He helped redefine masculinity on screen. Before Nicholson, leading men often projected stoicism and moral certainty. After Nicholson, they were allowed to be flawed, unstable, emotionally volatile, intellectually conflicted. He expanded the emotional vocabulary of male characters in mainstream cinema. Directors who worked with him often described his instincts as razor-sharp. He could sense when a scene lacked authenticity. He challenged dialogue that felt false. He refined moments to add psychological nuance.